Out there in the wilderness, I love to hunt, I love to fish, I love to collect wild mushrooms.
Well, you're the wild doc, and I got to ask you about that word wild.
You can't detoxify under stress. Your body will not detoxify hardly at all because your liver is literally doing the bare minimum to keep you alive.
Does it piss you off when you hear about the 101-year-old man that they say, well, what's the secret of your longevity? He said, well, I have 2 Dr. Peppers every night after dinner.
Science is proving that God actually provided for that person in this moment in time in their life, and it's out there in the wild.
I think what you're saying that works so well for people in sports very much can lead to longevity in their life. All right, guys, thank you for joining us today on JSLAY Made in the USA. I've got Dale Brown, AKA the Wild Doc here, and I hope you have your thinking caps on because you're about to get schooled. Dale, thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Glad to be here.
You went from being, a chiropractor and established in your own right out of Clarksville to now having an online following of 40,000, maybe plus, if you take into account all the various platforms. And you've been fighting this fight against the fraudulent mainstream media and some of the big institutions for what, maybe 10 years?
Yeah, roughly 10 years, been in practice since 2010, but even in chiropractic school is kind of where I started like really seeing pharmaceutical corruption that got me kind of fired up. So even in chiropractic school, I would get online and just do whatever I could to educate people on how they could be healthy, how they could get well, how that pharmaceutical industry and that drug they got you on for the rest of your life because they're not correcting the underlying cause. That isn't exactly the best thing for you. And actually they may be taking advantage of you.
Yeah.
So
that makes perfect sense. Well, you're the wild doc, and I got to ask you about that word wild. So you're wild enough at the middle of a convention when you got a guy with a crick in his neck, AKA JSLAY, to get on the ground and say, let's just do an adjustment right here. I think you're also wild in terms of taking risks. And then I see a lot of stuff of you out there in nature. So where does this wild doc persona come from?
So in a way, it's out there in the wilderness. I love to hunt. I love to fish. I love to collect wild mushrooms. I joke around. I've got a son, my little boy, literally at one point in time, I'd come home from work. He goes, Dad, I got to show you something. He wants to show me a dead snake on the road that him and my wife, when they took a walk, and he goes, hey, Dad, is this organic or is it poisonous? And like, so going out in the woods, I'm like, actually, son, yeah, that's a poisonous mushroom. But then when we would talk about like food we eat, hey, son, we buy organic, we eat healthy, we eat as close to the way in which God would have created that food that man can get, we can get our hands on it. So I love to be out in the wilderness. And from a standpoint of my Christian faith was to teach people that God's provisions are around us everywhere. So if somebody has, working with somebody with a fatty liver, cirrhosis, there are milk thistle, there's dandelion, there are multiple different herbs that actually are scientifically shown to improve the function and resolve that, and can actually be in terms of like hepatitis, even viral hepatitis, like milk thistle can actually protect your liver cells against damage from the hepatitis virus. So it's like, wow, that's really cool. Science is proving that God actually provided for that person in this moment in time in their life, and it's out there in the wild. So there's that aspect of it. There's also being the person I am, I'm a little wild and crazy. It's kind of like, I forget the old cereal commercials where it's like Johnny will try it or Jimmy or whoever the little kid was,
Yeah, right.
If we go
snowboarding, eat the worms on the playground just to prove you can.
Yes,
they're organic,
I would be that
right?
kid.
They're organic.
Yes, exactly.
Which that's probably pretty different than your average doctor. So I can see how that lends you some name credibility. So I was more of a guy, I'm definitely into health and from more of a fitness standpoint. And I know that you would say, well, hey, what I'm talking about with organics and milk thistle and, all of it, that is health and fitness. But in the sports world, it's more about like the macros. It's kind of a simplified, okay, get your right amount of protein, your carbs, your fats. And that's for guys who are actually like thinking about that stuff. There's some people that are just really talented and they eat a hamburger and some Dr. Pepper and go hit home runs. I mean, that does happen. But I guess a question that I would have for you is, does it piss you off when you hear about the 101-year-old man that they say, well, what's the secret of your longevity? He said, well, I have 2 Dr. Peppers every night after dinner. Because there are those stories, and I'm a Christian believer. I believe that God has provided for us in nature basically all that we need to sustain ourselves. However, you hear those stories and it's like, wait, this guy drank, Bud Light and Dr. Pepper was the key to his longevity, he thinks. What do you do with something like that?
I tell people like, well, I do hang my hat on the idea that stress is one of the biggest killers, is probably the biggest thing that
Ah,
shortens
yep.
our life. So the reality is, I mean, I've got like, I'm a very big research. So I'll explain it from this perspective. There are studies that say point blank, if you have an active vagal nerve, vagus nerve is your parasympathetic, it's your rest, digest, heal, recover. It's your immune system. It helps you fight off infection. And
Is this
so
is this a throughout the body nerve or one spot? Like, where's my
So the
vagal
vagal
nerve?
nerve goes from the brainstem. It's a cranial nerve, drops down in front of right through here in your neck, and then goes to about 2/3 descending colon. Then you have the sacral plexus for parasympathetic supply to the reproductive system and to like urinary tract and defecation. So, but parasympathetic is rest and digest. It's recuperate. It's repair from the daily strain and activity. Our sympathetic is our fight or flight, and our sympathetics are made for that immediate stress response. It's run from a tiger, it's escape a burning building, it's to escape a car crash or an intruder in our home. So we starve our vital organs like our liver, our digestive tract, all of our vital organs that are for immunity, are for digestion, absorption. They're all starved of blood flow and activity. So we down regulate that sympathetic energy to that area. The sympathetics trigger blood flow to our muscles and into our heart and lungs to just work hard, to run fast, to fight, whatever we got to do in that immediate survival. So if we're stuck in higher sympathetics, in this study looking at cancer patients that had a high parasympathetic supply, their staging, the physical staging, the way in which they stage cancer is kind of like, is it in a lump in the breast and only in one location, or is it in 2 to 3 lymph nodes, or is it gone systemic in the body? So it stages to 1 to 4. And they said somebody could be in stage 4, but actually have a longevity, a prognosis with a higher parasympathetic, that rest and digest, that heal and recover type nervous system balance. And their stage 4 could take another 30 years to kill the person.
Wow. So
Versus
go ahead.
somebody with a higher sympathetic tone. They've looked at this in breast cancer, that women with stage 1, if you had 100 women with stage 1 and you take the woman with stage 1 who has a very high sympathetic tone, a very high stress response, the risk of her going into metastatic stage 4, very short term, is very high.
So
A woman whose nervous system is calm, where her rest and digest nervous system is high, it could stay in stage 1 the rest of her life.
So as you're
It,
talking, I'm thinking, okay, how do we relate this back to the 100-year-old man? I think I'm getting
yeah,
it. Is
it's a
that
stress.
yeah, if he's a stress-free dude and the Dr. Pepper happens to kind of just relax him, and that's a big part of health as well, is
Yeah.
your mental, and mental is probably not nearly a strong enough word.
It's more than that. Most of the time when people hear stress, they think mental stress, but there's
Yeah.
mental, physical, chemical, emotional, all the things,
Well, that's that
So
connective vagus nerve you're talking about, right?
yes. So you can have, actually, they look at diabetics. There are people that they can reverse diabetes with a spinal surgery by taking pressure off the brainstem.
Wow.
It's Surgical Neurology International, September 2nd of 2010. I've noted it so many times when I talk from a chiropractor's point of view. We look at the spine and nervous system to realign and improve biomechanics. By doing that, we lower a physical, structural, mechanical stress on our body that is directly connected to and integrated into our central nervous system. The structure of our spine is.
Yeah.
So if we can remove that stressor, well, we lower that impact or that burden on somebody's nervous system. We get them out of that sympathetic tone and we can help them heal. That's why I don't treat diabetes. Legally, I have to say that because the FDA didn't approve chiropractic to treat diabetes, but I have countless type 2 diabetics no longer diabetic, and it was from adjusting their spines.
Wow.
Now, there are also, that surgical journal said obese patients didn't see as much improvement in their blood sugar regulation. They've seen some if they did have pressure on their brainstem, but not everybody with type 2 diabetes has pressure on the brainstem. So if there's not pressure, chiropractic is not going to do anything for that individual. But that's a physical stressor, that's a structural stressor on their spine, impacting their neurological balance. So those people who are stress-free, they're happy-go-lucky, they do and eat whatever they want. It's amazing what the body can do with a central nervous system that is really in balance and can adapt to the daily routine, the daily stressors, can assimilate and utilize the nutrition that they are eating and getting from the
Sure.
junk food they're eating, but then can remove and detoxify. You can't detoxify under stress. Your body will not detoxify hardly at all, because your liver is literally doing the bare minimum to keep you alive
Yeah.
if you're under high stress.
You know, in sports, I see this play out so well because I was an athlete. I played pro sports for 7 years with the Phillies, baseball, and in a sport like that, that's very much you've almost got to take your mind out of it. But when you're
Yeah.
negative, or when you're in a place of kind of that fight or flight, like, oh my gosh, I've got to get a hit, or I hope that the pitcher throws the pitch I'm expecting, like all this stuff that generates fear and anxiety.
Yep.
Your level of play drops by 199%.
Yeah.
Versus when you just let all that go and you kind of chill out, open up your mind about the possibilities rather than all the negativities that could come in. And pretty soon, like you've kind of got a leg up on anybody that's in front of you if you're in that place. So I think what you're saying that works so well for people in sports very much can lead to longevity in their life.
Yeah.
Right.
Oh yeah.